In this week's episode, we're going to be looking at a question that I get asked very regularly in the DMs by prospective clients and people who just generally follow my Instagram page. The question is, would you recommend joining the police? I think more people than ever are aware of that there are maybe downsides to joining the police that people often hadn't thought of in the past. Maybe issues that are becoming more prevalent than they used to be, and just giving people more pause for thought before they do actually pull the trigger on joining the police. So the things that we're going to look at in this episode are the work content, policing family, rank structure, the shift pattern, your own family, work-life balance, and last but definitely not least, health and fitness. So up first, the work content. When people think what police do, they're probably thinking they go out, they arrest people, they help victims, they solve crimes, they go to court, they get people put in prison, they go home and they have a great life. The reality is it's not normally like that. You kind of hear about the cool stuff, you tend not to hear as much about the boring admin side, the time where you'll spend 2 or 3 shifts in a row putting a case file together for CPS. You submit it and you think, oh God, I can't believe that's finally gone, I can't wait to get that job done. And you get a message back a few days later, CPS have discontinued the case. And you're like, oh right, I just spent 3-4 days of shift completely wasting my time because CPS couldn't be bothered to prosecute it. So things like that can kind of get you down a little bit. Level 4 constants, for those of you watching this who don't know what it is, when somebody's been arrested and they either need to be at hospital or they need to be in the pick being guarded, you have to sit with them, you can't go on your phone, you're supposed to keep eyes on them the entire time. And this is in custody, it's just you staring at this person for 3-4 hours at a time. Yeah, it does teach you how to become patient, I'll give you that, but it's not part of the job that people join up to do, and it's not part of the job that people think about when they sign up. So if you would struggle with that kind of job, policing might not be the job for you. We've also got things like waiting at custody. So let's say you arrested somebody on the high street and you take them to custody, it's a half an hour drive there. Sometimes you'll be waiting for 2, 3, maybe sometimes 4 hours just to see the custody sergeant. Again, you're waiting with the person, making awkward conversation, and maybe kicking off, they might be getting aggy. And you're powerless in that situation. You're just waiting with this person. Again, another job that you don't think about that you need to before you join, because if you can't deal with that, then ultimately being a police officer is not going to be for you. Lots of other jobs, especially on response, unfortunately. Response for me should be the area of policing that should be the best. It should be the most coveted, it should be the one that everybody wants to apply for because it has the most varied roles. You never know with policing, especially in response, what you're going to find when you turn up to a job. You might have a chance to go out and be proactive. Nowadays on response, it's understaffed, you're typically job to job, going to lots of crappy tit for tat domestics, even shoplifting jobs, minor assaults, jobs that are just from the start what you might classify as shit on shit, where it's 2 idiots had a scrap, had a fight, had a falling out, one's now making allegations against the other. Total waste of time. But because of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, a crime has to be recorded and it has to be investigated. And so you get stuck going these crappy little jobs again and again, and it just it drives you into the ground, and you get sick of dealing with them. If the team was bigger, these little crappy little jobs would be spread out a lot more, and you would have a chance to put more of yourself into jobs and put more into your investigations, because you're not feeling like you've got 10 investigations, I've only got 3. Cool, I can put a bit more effort into these investigations. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. Everybody feels stressed, everybody feels overworked and pulled pillar to post, job to job, without really having the time to actually put into your work that you would like to do. So that is something that certainly needs to bear in mind before you apply. Now, that was response. If you can get a specialism and move to a different department, whether that's CID, ARV, safeguarding, maybe traffic, or whatever other kind of specialised departments your force has. If you're in the Met, there's millions of them. Maybe like a plainclothes drug team, maybe like a proactive roads policing team, maybe TSG. Typically, those departments get left alone a hell of a lot more, and they get left to go and do their own thing. You can be more proactive. You have got more time to do the work you actually want to do without being constantly on your radio, constantly called to crappy jobs. Ultimately, to get onto those teams, you do need to really work hard and build up a portfolio of evidence to be able to make the jump, because when it comes to applying for the role, they're going to ask you what your experiences are relevant to that role. If you haven't got them because you haven't put the effort in to go and do more of those jobs, you might not ever get an interview. And if you do get to the interview, you're going to need to be able to talk about these jobs in detail. If you haven't got those experiences to talk about, you're probably not going to be able to land the job you want. You're going to have to stay on response. Now, some people do like response. I can see why. A lot of people join on it. For me, response has got a shelf life. 2, maybe 3 years tops. For me, after 3 years, I hit a wall and I was like, I've had enough of this now. I really need to specialize. And so that was what I did. You get the odd crazy person who'll do 20 years on response. They are very much a rarity nowadays. Most people can't hack that type of career. There's just too much going on. There's too much stress, too much feels like being overworked. But yeah, there are rare breeds and they do exist. Next up, we're going to look at the emotional side. This can be both good and bad. I should look at the bad first. Some of the pretty brutal jobs that you can go to. For me, the worst, most emotional jobs are generally when someone's lost their life. So it might be either a road traffic collision or it could be an agony message. By probably the most emotional job I ever went to as a police officer was when I've been quite early on. I was on my second night shift of the set, so the last one before rest days, and it was 5 o'clock in the morning, and I think I was back at the station. We were just chilling out with some colleagues, and I got a call over the radio, "Are you free to go and do an agony message?" And I was like, oh my god, an agony message at 5 a.m. in the morning on your second night shift when you're feeling already pretty emotionally drained from lack of sleep and also from the jobs that you've already been to. It's not the thing you want to do. So I turned up this agony message and it couldn't really got too much worse. It was a family, probably I think the dad was about 50, the kids were about early teens, and their mum had run away. They hadn't seen her for a couple of days, they didn't know where she was, and she'd run away to the hotel where her and her husband, the dad, had got married, and killed herself in the bath by cutting her wrists. And I had to go and deliver this message to this family and the kids there when I was already like feeling shit. And the flood works from the family was pretty crazy, and I'm there like really trying to maintain my professionalism, and I was almost breaking down as well because this was absolutely brutally just emotionally draining incident, and I'm not normally an emotional guy, so that was for me was really testing me, and those are the kind of things you have to be prepared to do. Agony messages are never fun. Sudden death as well can be quite traumatic, but typically I find once you've seen one dead body, you've kind of seen them all. Once you get that over that initial shock of seeing a dead body, because for most people before you join the police, you'll never have seen a body. There's just not something you normally come across. And the first time you see one, like the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, and you'll be kind of like, whoa, this is a kind of really surreal moment. It's quite hard to comprehend. It's quite hard to explain exactly what that feeling is. I'm not sure whether it's like bewilderment or puzzlement or shock. I don't know. But yeah, you've seen one, you've seen them all, unless you see a really badly degraded one, and they can be quite unpleasant. The smell, especially once you smell a dead body for the first time, it's not a smell that you ever forget, and as soon as you smell that smell again, you instantly know that you're about to find a body. So that's something you need to bear in mind. But on the positive side, there are some incredibly positive emotional experiences you can experience as a police officer. When your team work together and you get a good result, or your team works on a case together, goes to court and the person gets found guilty, gets sent away to prison for a few years, that is an awesome experience, because everything you've done, all from the initially seeing the victim, getting all the statements, gathering all the evidence, putting it all together, you and your team having to turn up to court to give evidence, and then seeing the person get put away, that's kind of the buzz that you join the job for. So those jobs do exist. They're probably not as common as you would want them to be, but when they do happen, because they're rare, they feel even better. And as well as that, it's just with the emotional side, one of the kind of quite odd memories that I have of the police was being awake at 4, 5, 6 in the morning, being so tired that you're delirious, and all your colleagues are the same, but you go into this state where you almost don't feel like you almost feel maybe like what it must be like to feel like you're on drugs. You kind of like feel spaced out, everyone's laughing, everyone's giggling, and it's a really surreal experience. And at the time, you'd rather probably not be there because you just want to go to bed. But looking back, I have very fond memories of those moments, because I think when you're all suffering in that same way, it brings you closer together, creates that bond, and that leads me on to the next one. So that is the kind of the policing family. So very much so with the police, it's not just when you're in it. If it's a community, it's not a career when you join. And so you're working these weird shifts with these people, going to weird jobs that are stressful, that are challenging, that are emotionally taxing, and you form a bond with all of your colleagues. You have this trust and understanding because you've all been through the same experiences. And that for me was one of the best parts of the job, because you can relate to these people all the time. Yes, you'll probably still have people on your team that you don't get on with too well, maybe you don't have that massive connection, but you still have a bond, a mutual understanding, and that really does kind of endear the police to you. It does make you feel like you have got a policing family. It does make you feel like you are part of a big community, and I'd say that's, for me, that was definitely one of the best parts of the job. Next up, we're going to look at dealing with members of the public. Now, you probably think dealing with the public, you picture an officer on the beat walking down the street, catching up with old grannies doing their shopping and maybe reprimanding some kids for kicking a ball close to a car, and then maybe telling a car to slow down, and that kind of general village style policing. The reality is that doesn't really happen. You probably find that you're very rarely actually out on the beat. You'll either be job to job or you'll be out in a car, not really interacting with members of the public when you're not at a job. Now, for me, there's two types of people in the world. There's people that like police and there's criminals. And there's not really anybody in between. You get these people on Facebook, you see them in the keyboard warriors, digging into the police. And I always think, why do you hate the police? The police generally don't want to get involved with anything that doesn't involve crime, because they've got enough to be getting on with already, to be getting on with other people's business that isn't involving crime. So if you've got a negative impression of the police, for me, that's most likely because you've annoyed a police officer at some point. And to annoy a police officer, you're generally committing a crime. It's very rare that you meet somebody who fits not in one of those categories. Therefore, you have got, at the same time, the good people tend to be the victims, tend to be the witnesses, and generally you do feel sorry for these people. Generally, they do deserve your time, and it's very easy to not see things from their perspective. Let's say, for example, the archetypal Mrs. Miggins, she's never had an interaction with the police in her life, and one day somebody smashes her car window and steals her loose change from her the centre console of her car. To the police, that's not a job that anybody really cares about. It's so small time compared to somebody getting stabbed or somebody getting run over. But to Mrs. Miggins, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to her, and it's very easy to disregard the standard of the job, but you need to then try and relate that back why this is so bad for her, because she lives in a world completely ignorant to all the criminality that is going on around her, and she's never actually been involved in this criminality world before. So you need to then try and relate to her on that level and see it from her perspective. It's very easy to not do that. So that's something, if you are planning to join, the kind of job that you need to give your all, because if you don't, you then get a complaint from Mrs. Miggins that the officer was dismissive of her words and wasn't bothered about taking a statement, and that can get back to you, and then your inspector gets on your case. So definitely bear that in mind if you are going to join the job. Next up, we're going to be looking at the chain of command / the rank. So everybody who joins the police, unless you're on the inspector fast track scheme, which I'm not sure exists anymore, goes in at police constable level. Above them, you've got sergeants, inspectors, chief inspectors, superintendent, chief super, ace, assistant chief constable, deputy chief constable, something like that. As a police constable, you rarely deal with anyone other than sergeants. Occasionally you'll deal with inspectors. If you're dealing with a chief inspector, you might be getting a briefing, you might be getting a severe bollocking, but typically it's sergeants and then inspectors. Having a good sergeant and having a good inspector can be the difference between having a good job or having a really poor job. If you've got a sergeant who doesn't really know what they're doing, or they're very anal about every investigation being investigated to the nth degree at all costs, you're putting on a miserable time. You're going to have a massive workload, you're going to be demoralised, wasting your time investigating investigations that quite literally have got no chance of going anywhere, but your sergeant's scared that if they don't pass their random checks by the inspector or higher, that this investigation wasn't done to the nth degree, that they're worried about it. If you get a sergeant who is far more practically minded and you've got some crappy jobs on your workload and you go, Sarge, these jobs, they're going nowhere, there's no evidence, can we get rid of them? He's like, yeah, cool, I'll write a report on it and get it closed off, awesome. That's the kind of sergeant you want, one that's backing you, one that's on your side, one that understands what it's like to be a constable and how much workload you have to deal with nowadays. And it's same with an inspector. Although they're not going to be writing your jobs off for you, they are going to make it easier for you to get things like Section 18s, and if you get any complaints from members of the public, the inspector's the one that deals with it. If you're pally with your inspector and your inspector understands what it's like to be a constable and isn't stuck up their own arse, then they will very quickly just bat these investigations away from members of the public who make complaints. If you get some inspector who's got desire to go up the rank chain and he's looking for opportunities to stick it to constables, you might get shafted sometimes, but you have to be prepared for that. If you can be pally with your station inspector and be relatively pally on first name terms with your shift inspector, you've got a far better chance of being protected by them. So yeah, bear that in mind. In regards to career progression and promotion up the ranks, I think it's probably never been easier to rise up. Unfortunately now, with a lot of officers leaving the force for a multitude of reasons and newer officers joining, there's less and less experience on area, on section, whatever you guys call it. And so therefore the competition to rise up is lower than ever. So if you are half decent and you can get a couple of years under your belt, you can start acting. Now, 5, 6, 7 years ago, acting after 2 years was almost unheard of. Nowadays, it's almost the norm. You do your 2 years, you might tutor, and then if there's an opportunity, you can become an acting sergeant. For me, it's way too young, way too inexperienced. But if you are half decent, the opportunity's there. And in my experience, I worked not directly underneath. Actually, no, yeah, there was. I had an acting sergeant, not going to name any names, who was utterly atrocious. We had a very inexperienced team with a very inexperienced sergeant, and our team was making mistakes quite regularly. This was probably my first to second year as a constable. We were messing up DV jobs, which if you're in the job, you'll know that those are we touch like gold dust now. Like if you mess up on a DV job, there's most likely going to be some kind of investigation that takes place into the job. Potentially, you might be getting Reg 15s, that's a written warning. Thankfully, we had none of that, but we were getting investigated a lot because our sergeant was just not able to control jobs. We were having to second guess every job that we went to, like what do we think we should do? What's the sergeant going to want us to do? And often the time they wouldn't be available on the radio, and it was just an absolute, for want of a better term, clusterfuck. And thankfully, that sergeant was not let go, but they were kind of pushed out the door, and it was very much to the benefit of our team. But again, not everybody wants to become a sergeant. There's an argument that response sergeants is probably the hardest job because you've got a lot of inexperienced people on your team now, so you need to be constantly watching all of them, as well as looking at the jobs coming in, worrying about your handover, worrying about what your inspector's going to be thinking as well. So you basically got all angles to look at, fighting fires all the time. Generally, the best sergeants are the ones that have been in the most time because they've got the most familiarity with the job. They know how to deal with incidents better. They don't need to spend time worrying about how to deal with one job because they've dealt with it 1,000 times before. So typically, I would say the more experienced sergeants are generally the better ones. Next up, we're going to look at the shift pattern. Now, for me, the shift pattern it has its pluses and it has its minuses. You've got like the 6 on 4 off, which is 2 earlys, 2 lates, 2 nights, 4 off, and then you've got 2 days, which is 2 12-hour shifts on day shift, 2 12-hour shifts on night shifts, and then 4 days off. And then some of the constabularies have some other kind of weird pattern. They're not as common. The 2 that I just mentioned are far and away the most common in my experience. Benefits of them, especially the 6 on 4 off, is that you get 24 hours off in between your earlys to your lates and then your lates to your nights, and then you get 3.5 days off at the end of your shift pattern. If you're into hobbies and pastimes that aren't particularly social, you actually get a lot of time around your shifts to do things that you need to do. Now, you might be quite tired in that time, and you might feel like you need to rest, but ultimately the time is there for you to make the most of. And I thought the 6 on 4 off was actually a pretty decent shift pattern. Although it's hard to have that really dialed in routine, because it doesn't correlate with a typical 7-day working week. some days you're off, sometimes you're off weekends, sometimes you're on, and again, it just doesn't really give you that kind of chance at having a normal routine. But if you can adapt your lifestyle around that typical 9 to 5, Monday to Friday routine, then it does make things quite easy. When you adapt to it, actually, it's not about shift pattern. I never worked the 4 on, 4 off, so I can't really comment so much on that. But I would think that 12-hour shifts, 4 in a row, is quite a brutal undertaking, and I think those guys probably suffer more. I know that on work for less days, but the more intensity, and by the time you get to the end of that second night shift, a lot of my clients who work that, particularly paramedics, they're absolutely exhausted, and then it makes it harder going into the rest days. It takes longer to recover. So again, swings and roundabouts. And then looking at a kind of work-life balance. One thing that a lot of officers struggle to do, especially when they first start, is not bringing the job home with them. That was certainly something that I struggled with. I was always quite proactively minded, so even when I wasn't on shift, I was constantly looking for cars, looking for nominals, and especially when I was out and about. And when I was at home, I'd be watching things like police interceptors on my rest days, like kind of what you might call job pissed, like just obsessed with the job. And when you do that, it just makes it harder to live your own life outside of the job, because you're just constantly thinking about police, because it is almost a community rather than a career. It's easy to lose yourself in it and become completely enveloped, and that was certainly something that I struggled with initially, and I think that got me massively out of the habit of going to the gym, got me out of the habit of prepping food properly and just relying on just doing it at work. And so that's something that if you are going to join, bear in mind not to let yourself get horrendous work-life balance. Don't get married to the job, because you will ultimately regret it. At the start you won't, because you can put more in and you get more out, but the balance is off, and anything in balance long term will ultimately, everything will just tip off, and then you're going to be absolutely fucked. And whether that will be a problem at work, a problem in your relationship, a problem with friends, family, mental health, weight problems, for physical health, I don't know, but it's likely that that will happen, unfortunately. So bear that in mind, because I made that mistake, and if my mistake can teach you to not make the same mistake, then you're onto a winner. Finally, we come to nutrition and training and health and fitness in general. Now, one thing that you notice with most police officers, and I notice particularly, is nobody ever joins the job and then gets leaner. Everybody always gains weight. And I think the reasons for that are multiple. People get stressed with the job, they turn to food as a coping mechanism. People get tired from the job and they turn to food as a mechanism to provide quick fixes of energy. And then people become more overweight and they feel down and they need a way to make themselves feel better. Again, they turn to food. And unfortunately, a lot of police officers aren't always the most organised on their rest day. They come on shift, they'll go to a job, and then another job, and before they know it, they've been on shift 6 hours, they haven't eaten or drank a thing, they're starving, they're thirsty, and as you know, when you're starving and you're thirsty, you're not going out to buy a salad. You're probably going to go to McDonald's, you're going to go to Greg's, you're going to go and buy a meal deal, maybe with an additional chocolate bar, and it's very hard to keep on track of your calories, and unless you are super up on your meal prep, or you're in a team that gives you time to eat at normal times, which is rare, it's very difficult, very, very difficult to maintain that good nutritional standard. And I think there's a lot of reasons why police officers don't. It's the lack of preparation. If you do prepare your food on your last rest day, after your early shifts, before your night shifts, and you've got food with you, you're taking that decision out of your mind, and you can do it by being prepared. And if you have to make that decision when you're hungry, you're going to mess up. And the more often you do that, the bigger you're going to get. I learned that one the hard way. I hardly did any meal prep in the first few years, just bought it all on shift. Massive waste of money, and just laziness. It's just pure and simple. I'd meal prepped in the past, I just couldn't be bothered. And when you have these habits and you're going on for weeks and months, and you kind of get habit into going to the sandwich bar, going to McDonald's, going to Co-op, which is what I used to go to and get their meal deal with something else as well, like £5 a go. It's expensive, it's such a waste of money, and they're eating loads of bread and dough products. So stupid. And so yeah, getting to the habit of meal prepping is actually probably one of the best things that you can do as a police officer. And then training. Probably the hardest thing around training as a police officer is feeling like you've got no energy, feeling like you've got no time. The feeling like you've got enough energy is generally because the nutrition's been poor, the hydration's been poor, and the sleep is poor. And so then you feel like you shouldn't go and train because you've got enough energy. But there's a hidden benefit of training in the gym or running, is that unlocks more energy. It increases the speed of your metabolism, and it gives you more energy to train again. It gives you more energy to be a good police officer, to be a good family member, a good friend. And if you don't, you're just keeping yourself trapped. It's like a false economy. You're not reserving your energy. You're keeping yourself trapped in bad headspace with bad habits. You have to force yourself out of it and break out of it. No one's going to do it for you. It's down to you. You need to go and do something. And if you can do 2, 3, 4 days in a row of exercising, the difference in your mindset is phenomenal. I can't emphasize it enough. It will just change how you're feeling about yourself as a person. You'll be more optimistic. Things will seem easier, and it makes it easier to stick to your diet. You'll probably sleep better. When you start unpicking these little bad habits and you start adding more and more and more, you get the snowball effect, and all of a sudden, after a few weeks, you feel like a different person. You can't believe you ever used to live like you used to live. But it takes breaking that habit. It's hard. If you're stuck in that place with no energy, feeling overweight, poor nutrition, poor sleep, dopamine addicted, it's really hard to break it. It really is. But you have to break it because no one's going to break it for you. And the longer you leave it, the harder it gets. Trust me, take it from me. It took me 4 years to sort it out. So there we go. That is my kind of process of a balanced review on each element of being a police officer and the things that you need to consider. Overall, would I recommend it? I would. And if I went back in time to 2019 when I joined, I would join all over again. I would be able to do better because I've got the experience, and my expectations would be different, and I'd be able to stay fitter and healthier. I think one of the reasons why a lot of officers don't stick it out anymore is because of their inability to deal with the stresses of the job, because they haven't taken steps themselves to address the things I just talked about in the health and fitness part of the sleep, the food, the training, the mindset, the mental health. If you don't look after yourself in any of those ways, the job can very quickly feel overwhelming. It can feel like it's shit at home and it's shit at work and you need a relief and an escape. And the easiest thing to do, what it seems like the easiest thing to do, is to leave the police and say the police was shit. If the force made more of an effort to make everybody, officers, eat the right foods, train more than just one crappy PST session a year, gave them opportunities to sleep, rest more, looked after them, more people would stay in the job, the standard of the officers would increase, morale would increase, the standards of the service to the public would also increase. But the problem is the forces are so run down, consecutive governments have slashed funding for police forces, and now they're in like a survival mode. They're just trying to keep officers as much as they can. At the same time, they're having to bring in lower officers, they're having to lower the standards for officers coming in. Some forces now have lowered the score on the bleep test from 5.4 to 3 point something. If you listen to this, you're watching this, 5.4 is not hard. You should be able to do that. It's not hard to get to that level. If you feel like you can't, it's more likely a mindset thing than a physical thing. And dropping that to 3 point something, just scrap it all together. What's the point? Just do a pulse check. It's the same thing. 3.4 basically means you can walk. And for me, that shows that forces are struggling massively to attract people into the constabularies. I think the media portrayal of officers doesn't paint police in a good light. You see more people coming out. You see officers being prosecuted by the IOPC. That lad that was done recently, had been in for a long time, had multiple awards, and because he arrested a lad with a knife who had assaulted a granddad and didn't show him respect and talked to him rudely and got sacked. I'm sorry, but what the fuck? This was a fantastic officer, and because of one incident where he maybe didn't act with the absolute highest levels of professionalism, he's been sacked. The IOPC needs rehauling because it's not acting in the police's interest whatsoever. They're almost anti-police. They should be impartial, but they're not. Again, another thing you need to bear in mind. Again, I'd still say, I kind of went on a tangent there, I would still say joining the police is good. It will develop you as a person like nothing else will. It will give you opportunities to see the world how it actually is. It will remove a lot of the fog around communities, around the public, around criminality, and you will understand people a lot better. It will give you a massive increase in psychology. It will teach you really to develop a lot of patience, to be able to bite your tongue. It will increase your organisational skills as well. It might instill some discipline in you. So if you go in and did 5 years, 100% you'll leave that as a better person than when you joined. Not many people nowadays seem to want to stay in the police as a career long term. The pay probably doesn't help with that. The pay in the police nowadays is pretty low, and a lot of people can't afford to switch from a career to go to the police. So again, attracting the younger people who maybe haven't got as much life experience. So yeah, overall, join. Just be aware of the potential pitfalls. Be aware that it probably isn't going to be a long-term career for you, because the statistics show that it won't be. Go in with your eyes wide open. Make sure you look after yourself as a priority, and take each job as it comes. Yeah, that's probably as much as I can tell you. Yeah, hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, it would mean the world to me if you could subscribe to the channel so we can grow it and help as many shift workers as possible. And I'll see you guys on the next one.